Good evening, it's Right Blend. I'm here just outside the Ottawa Courthouse, behind the camera, Chris Stacey, back on the job again. This was the end of day 8 of the trial of Pat King, and it was a very big day. A lot of developments happening today. So let's go through a bit. We resumed this morning finally with Crown witness Natalie Hanaud of OC Transpo. Natalie spoke a little bit about, of course, more about the sit reps. There was a legal argument about the admissibility of the OC Transpo sit rep reports from the SCC, the Service Command Center, and whether they could be counted into the trial as admissible, not counting into hearsay, double hearsay, triple hearsay. But the argument came down that the defense said that they were documents produced in the regular course of business for OC Transpo, even though they were responding to an irregular event, convoy, unplanned or planned, large event happening. They were responding to that, and it was the course of the business of OC Transpo and responding to that and producing these minutes from these meetings, these sit reps, 57 of them, where different stakeholders in OC Transpo, like fleet maintenance, SCU, we get a lot of different attention around here. So that's Special Constable Unit, Mobile, which is the mobile supervisors and superintendents, recording and observing things on the road and feeding them back to OC Transpo for the purpose of planning their service and detours. So there was 57 of these sit reps. Again, the Crown's position was that none of these sit reps were admissible. The Crown was saying that they're not admissible because they were not produced in the normal course of business. So long story short, some case law was provided, not very much, and the Crown made quite a large, long oral submission, but ultimately the Crown's oral submission was not victorious. The judge ruled with the defense that they were admissible, that they were good evidence, and it would be a matter of weight and not admissibility. And then the defense, Ms. Natasha Calvino for Mr. King, went through all the sit reps to point out different areas, because in his ruling, the judge said that he would not be just going fishing. He would rely on the counsel to tell him which areas he should consider in these 57 sit reps. So the judge actually, so the defense took some time to go through the 57 sit reps and highlight different areas they thought were of import. Things discussing like opening of roads, closing of roads, service was good on this day, so on and so forward. And it's an interesting thought because these were documents produced by OC Transpo, and some of them say things like road blocked. So it was an interesting question why the Crown tried to have them withheld from the court, but ultimately, of course, the Crown did not succeed. The judge did rule with the defense and let those 57 sit reps be admissible to the trial. I believe they were made exhibit number 30, and you'll have to forgive me, there's a terrible amount of traffic around here. It is not the usual car background, but the trial is on break now for a couple of weeks, at least actually till early July. I believe July 2nd it's penciled over till, and we don't even know if July 2nd and 3rd are confirmed. I believe July 4th we will have, and then the middle of July for more dates after that. So there's going to be a long break now. So we finished with there was quite a large Crown re-examination of Miss Hanaud, where they did the same thing and they went through the different sit reps and talked about different things that were reported in them, like Pat King, for example, was actually specifically mentioned several times in these OC Transpo sit reps, and we believe that, and that's probably because the NCRCC, the National Capital Region Command Center, produced information that was shared through to the SEC that included Pat King's name, and it came from police intelligence sources and otherwise, and that's how it came to be included in this. So we go past that and we go to the afternoon. We come to the Crown's last witness with his officer Anthony Carmo. He's the arresting officer of Pat King, and he testified. So the Crown walked him through the arrest. His day, it was February 18th. He reported for morning duty 6:45. Briefing at 7 o'clock at Central, which was Elgin. He was not at the EY Center as he testified on cross, and he was assigned with special duty that day to go and arrest Pat King. So the Crown walked through quite meticulously what kind of information he was given concerning Pat King, what Pat King might have been wearing, where Pat King was staying, so forward, where Pat King was going to go that day so he could go and effect the arrest. And there were, again, quite a lot of detail about all of this. This was happening in the afternoon. And at one point, the witness, Officer Carmo from the Ottawa Police Service with 8 years of service, he is a constable, testified about how there was an intelligence or a unit observing Pat King, passing real-time information. They knew Pat King was staying in Gatineau, so they had positioned en Booth just north of the War Memorial, and he described exactly where he had tucked away his fully marked police cruiser, police interceptor. And when Pat King finally did approach and they had the real-time intelligence to corroborate that, they pulled up and they actually blocked Pat King's vehicle. There were 3 other males in the vehicle. Pat King was in the passenger seat. he was not driving, and then he began to try and start the arrest. So we watched a video, which was a Pat King live stream of the arrest, and Officer Carmo detailed exactly what happened during the arrest, that the window was slightly down in the vehicle Pat King was riding in, and the officer attempted to get Pat King to come out of the vehicle, and Pat King was immediately asking for a lawyer. The officer testified that he lit up a smoke, and we do know that there is count 4 on the indictment, in the information against Mr. Pat King, is obstructing police. So I believe that would have to do with this encounter when he was arrested. So he finishes his Crown testify, defense cross-examination. On testimony, he does admit in chief, he does admit to the Crown that he arrested Mr. King. He did an informal right to counsel and a informal caution to him under section, I don't know, of the criminal code. And then he did a formal one once they were in the back of the police car. This all happened around like between 12:38, say, and 12:42 p.m. So very short from the time the police pulled up, blocked King's vehicle, went to the vehicle, asked Pat King to step out, informally cautioned him and read him his right to counsel, and then had Pat King in the back of the car and reading him his actual formal rights and formal counsel. And at that point, and formal caution, sorry, and at that point, Mr. King indicating not being completely silent in the back of the car, and Officer Carmo testified that Mr. King was able to establish connection with a lawyer once he was actually back at the police headquarters. He testified, I believe, that it took 8 minutes to get him from booth at the War Museum to the central booking to the jail cell, basically, and then in that area around 1:15, I believe he testified, he was able to reach his lawyer on the phone in a private booth where he could have counsel, solicitor counsel confidentiality. So it's an interesting process. So we know that Pat King was charged for that event, and the judge, so the defense goes through the whole thing, and basically, yes, it was a short process. She asked Officer Carmo a couple of questions, and some of those questions pertain to, sorry, we just have some company here, it's all good, and some of those questions, we love you, Johnny. So defense asked Mr. Carmo, Officer Carmo, if Pat King complied with him, he did. If he was polite, he did. If he surrendered his cell phone, he did. So there was really no big delay here. It was a matter of minutes. There was somebody in the car, the officer testified, that was yelling at him when it was locked and he tried to open it to not ruin his new car, but it was not Pat King who was doing that. Pat King did step out of the car, did surrender his cell phone, asked for lawyers, maybe had a cigarette. I believe that's pretty much accepted. But he at no time was rude to the officer, never refused his orders, and did act in a fairly prompt manner. So the judge had some very pointed follow-up questions after the defense cross-examination of the witness. So the judge basically asked the Officer Carmo, in your professional opinion, did this individual, Pat King, obstruct or resist you? And he said, he said no. Because he was asked, did you lay any charges against Mr. King at the time for obstructing you? No. And if there was obstruction, the judge asked, it would be when he was getting out of the car in a slightly, perhaps delayed manner, possibly. And that would be it. So I missed this part, but apparently it's possible. The judge went to the defense or somebody and he said, concerning count 4, obstruct police, you don't have to worry about that, something along that line. And then he said in a follow-up, and I did catch this, I don't want to put it out there if that's it. So I think he was talking about the evidence or allowing the Crown to continue to provide something. The Crown said that they would not, so basically leaving the door open, not saying, okay, I'm going to throw it out right here, is how I took it in a formal sense. But then the Crown said, well, they don't have any more evidence to lead concerning the particular count 4, obstruct police, but they will be making submissions about how each piece of evidence goes to each of the accusations, to each of the charges. So that's where we are right now. The judge making a very pointed comment, others pointing out that judges don't really do that. But when we watched the video, when we heard the testimony, King gets out of the vehicle, King hands over his personal property, King is polite and respectful, requests a lawyer over and over again. In fact, it's the first thing when the officer in the video reads him the charges, which are much shorter than they are today. I believe it was 4 at the time, it's 9 or whatever now. Mr. King asks him, okay, what are the charges? He repeats it again, and then asks for a lawyer, and just asks for a lawyer several times. So that was an interesting exchange. We'll see where it goes. We are now adjourned until at least July 2nd. July 2nd and 3rd are not guaranteed dates for the trial. We definitely probably will have July 4th, and then a week in the middle of July. The Crown has rested their case. It is now the defense's case. The defense will be calling witnesses and providing evidence to the court. So we'll see where that goes, and I will be there to cover it for you if I can, to the best of my abilities. From Ottawa, with Chris behind the camera, I'm Right Blinn.